Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Colton. Just a short one for you today, but I wanted to share my personal experience having switched from Sony to Canon and basically highlight two benefits of that switch, but also two things that have kind of cropped up as being a bit of a con switching away from Sony. And I'll kind of rapid fire go through these, but if you want further elaboration or if you have any questions, drop them in the comments section and I'll give you a more detailed answer. But I've been shooting on Canon for almost a year now. I shot on Canon many years ago for many years. And then I switched over to Sony when they came out with the Sony A7. I just thought, wow, this is the future. It has been the future. But I shot with Sony for probably 6 years, maybe a little more than that. So definitely spent some time over there. And now I have come back. I have the Canon R7, which has been phenomenal. Overall, super happy with it. It has served me exceptionally well in the last year. But in that time, I've identified some strengths and weaknesses from when I switched over. So I want to share those with you guys. And we'll start out with the positives. So the first thing is, to me, the most important and the reason why I switched away from Sony, which was color science. I was never really impressed by Sony's colors. Always felt like I kind of had to fix the colors. And so eventually I got fed up. And after switching to a Pentax 645D, which I still shoot on, I saw what the other side was like and how great out of camera the colors can be, to where you're editing to sort of heighten what's already there, kind of nudge it in one direction or another, but you're not having to fix those colors. And so I wanted the same thing for my sort of daily camera, what I'm doing talking heads on, that kind of versatile photography. So switching over to Canon right away. I mean, like 2 days later, I flew out to Montana and shot a bunch of photos and just absolutely was blown away by the default color science from Canon. So it absolutely resolved all of my color science issues that I had with Sony. So maybe that's something where if you've been feeling like the colors out of Sony are lacking, or you're having issues with that, then, maybe that could be a benefit of switching to another brand like Canon, although Canon is not the only one with good color science. But that's definitely the number one benefit for me in this last year, having switched over to Canon. Now, the next benefit is debatable, heavily debatable, in fact, and that is, I think, a better overall camera design. Now, let me preface that. Sony makes great cameras as well. And Sony certainly is going to have certain features or certain design elements that are going to be better than what Canon has. But to me, the overall package on Canon has been better. Few examples. Ergonomics is one. It's a simple one. But every single Sony camera I've ever had, I've had 6 of them, maybe 7. They all had terrible ergonomics. Well, I won't say terrible. They had less than ideal ergonomics. And oftentimes when I would do really long shoots, my fingers would be in pain and it just was noticeable. I'm sure they've fixed that problem. I hope they fix that problem. But with Canon, even on the Canon R7, not even their flagship camera, the ergonomics are far better. The button layout makes sense. The features of the camera are significantly improved to where I'm not noticing the camera while I'm shooting. I think the lens mount is another element of that. Every Sony lens that I ever bought had a built-in adapter to sort of compensate for the fact that they built that lens mount for APS-C cameras and then decided later to cram a full-frame sensor in there. Canon built theirs with both in mind, and so their lens, I think, are a little bit better designed and maybe a little bit lighter overall. I don't know. Haven't done a ton of research on that, but I definitely felt that with Sony for sure. But it's also little things. I use my Canon camera to shoot photos, but I also use it for talking heads, for B-roll. And when I was doing that type of stuff with Sony, it was such a pain to switch between video and photo. There's a lot of movement, a lot of things you have to press and adjust, and then you got to completely change all your settings. You don't have a memory for video versus for photo. And with Canon, there's one little switch. You switch it one way, it's in photo mode. You switch it the other way, it's in video mode. And it remembers the settings independent of one another. So you can keep your video settings locked in and then be adjusting and playing around with the photo settings all day. And that makes it so much easier to take that camera out, go do a shoot. I'm getting B-roll, I'm taking photos, and it's seamless. Not only that, another layer in, there's a setting to be able to then say, hey, you've got 2 cards in here. We'll save all the photos to one card and all the videos to the other card. Genius. I love that feature. So there's just a lot in the Canon camera that has, at least for me personally, made my photography and videography experience much more seamless and pleasant. And so I have to say the overall design is much better. Does Sony still have some things that they do better? Absolutely. But I think the full package works better for me on Canon. But it's not all sunshine and roses on the Canon side. And there are 2 distinct cons that I've noticed that have impacted me a little bit. The first one is somewhat temporary. And I also had the same problem on Sony when I first switched. And that is that there's just not a lot of lens available for Canon right now. They have not fully opened the system to third parties. And so it's a relatively new system. It's not slim pickings, but it's certainly not the robust mount or selection of lens that you had on Sony. Now, when I first switched to Sony, I was an early adopter and there wasn't very many lenses available. You had to either pay for super expensive lens or you had to adapt things. And it was a pain for sure. And it kind of sucks to now be in that same place again. But Sony opened up their mount. Third parties started building a bunch of lens. Sony continues to build a bunch of lens. And just, time has gone by. And so lens have been deployed. So if you're on the Sony system, you've got so many native options to choose from. And in addition to that, many of them can also be found in a highly robust used market. And that's just not on Canon right now. There's a used market, sure, but it's not nearly as robust as what Sony's got. And even brand new lens, still not as robust as what Sony's got. I think I've heard some stuff, rumors, whispers, that Canon is going to open the mount fully to third parties. It's just a rumor right now, so it doesn't count until it actually happens. But I do hope that it does happen, because it's a short-term problem. It's a con for sure, but it's one that, with some time, Canon will have many, many more lens deployed. Eventually, third parties will be making tons and tons of lens, and then you'll have tons to choose from. But as of the recording of this video, that is something that kind of sucks if you switch from Sony to Canon. Now, I did get a adapter that allows me to adapt EF lens to the RF cameras. And I will say autofocus works pretty much the same. Like, it maybe is a little slower, but it doesn't seem like there's any loss in autofocus for what you would have been used to shooting an EF camera. So the ability to then take all of Canon's pass lens and still use them on your RF camera does at least cushion that blow a little bit. So I've got the adapter and I have a few lens and they work flawlessly. They're a little bigger because they're designed for a different system, but they do work well. So not the end of the world. And then kind of the final con for Canon, and again, this could just be me. It could be this specific camera. It could even just be this unit is defective in some way. It's happened to me before. But I do notice less sharpness in the photos from what I was getting on Sony. And this camera actually has more megapixels than most of the cameras that I had from Sony, and even a better lens than some of the lens that I had. So, I would shoot a lot of my talking heads on the Sony a6400 with the kit pancake lens, the cheapy, crappy lens. And yet the video was sharper than the video from Canon and the Sigma 18-50, which the Sigma 18-50 is no high-end lens, but it is kind of like a more mid-range lens. It is a better lens than that pancake lens was. But even outside of that, even just looking at like photos, when you punch in, I mean, they're sharp, they look great, they're detailed, but they're lacking that like kind of final mile, right? You punch in and it just seems like, oh, I thought I would be able to see more detail than I am. And on Sony, when you punched in, it felt like, oh, it's really sharp all the way in. It almost sometimes seemed like it got sharper when I zoomed in. And so I don't know, maybe that's an issue with the Canon R7. Maybe that's an issue with this specific Canon or the specific camera unit. Maybe other models or other units don't have that problem. But it definitely seems like multiple different lens, different quality levels. They all are sharp, they're in focus, but then once you punch in really close, they just seem like, oh, I thought it was going to look a bit sharper than it does. So I don't know, not a big deal. No one in their right mind besides me is pixel peeping my own images like that. So no one's ever going to know that they're not that sharp. But that was maybe one con. And I think in video mode is where it's the most prevalent, because you're not punching in and zooming into your video, and yet you do still see that difference. So potentially, if you want the most sharpness, you ought to stick with Sony. But for me, the increased dynamic range, the better color science, that all makes shooting with Canon worth it, even knowing that I'll lose a little bit of that perceived sharpness. So those are my pros and cons. Of course, everyone's going to have a little bit different opinion. If you want more detailed answer on any of this, feel free to ask your questions in the comments below, and I'll be happy to answer any that come in. But otherwise, if you found it interesting, if you got anything out of it, please do give me a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and that's going to keep you in the know for when the next video drops. But for now, I'm Colton. I'll see you in the next one.